Splinter is injured, and Raph's got a sigh for Karai. Here's your look at the NECA toys, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Last Ronin, Raphael. From the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic book series The Last Ronin, in a future New York City far different from the one we know today, a lone surviving turtle goes on a seemingly hopeless mission to obtain justice for his fallen family and friends. Based on issue number 2 of the comic, this figure depicts Raphael's final fight with the nefarious Foot Clan and features battle-damaged Deco. The first to fall Raphael action figure stands in 7-inch scale and has over 20 points of articulation. It includes 2 interchangeable head sculpts, interchangeable hands, and a slew of arrows that can fit into the figure's shell. Comes in collector-friendly window box packaging with open front flap featuring custom illustration by Last Ronin artist Ben Bishop. Raph may have started his life in a sewer, but his life's going to end at the bottom of a bay. Just before we get a closer look, though, at the NECA Toys Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Last Ronin, first to fall, Raphael. First, I'd like to thank the folks over at NECA Toys. Second, I'd like to take the tape measure, which, hey, I already have. And the tape measure is going to tell us that Raphael is going to stand at 5.5 inches in height, or the fallen turtle is 14 centimeters tall. He may have been the first to fall, but he wasn't the first figure that we've looked at. In fact, the first figure that we looked at from The Last Ronin happened to be Michelangelo. Then we followed things up right after that, obviously looking at Leonardo. Comparing the sizes of the turtles, Raphael's a little more closer in size to Michelangelo. He's a tad bit shorter, though, than Leonardo. I feel like this might be a bit more of a sadder review, not only with the condition of the character in the comics, but also as well the state of the figure. As you can see, Raphael, though, is covered in red, and I'm not just necessarily referring to his bandana. The character is soaked in blood. And he also comes, of course, included with lots of accessories that can be impaled inside the turtle's body. Maybe not necessarily as grim, the character does come included with some swappable hands. Noted right now, the figure does have close fists on the ends of his forearms that can be easily swapped out with a couple of sparring hands. One thing, though, you'll notice consistently across the board, the lay of the land does have quite gorier effects, and it even starts with hands as well. He has blood all over his hands. You can see they're nicely wrapped. A little more of a sheen to these hands as well, but again, they just swap out with the hands that he has. The figure does also have sai, and for that pair of sai, he has 2 different ways of holding them. He has a close, more smaller gripped hands. So if you want to have, like, for example, don't worry, we're going to look at the size, but if you want to have the size, for example, held this way, then he has a smaller grip to do that. If, though, you want to have the figures displayed with, for example, where you take the sai and you have them sort of holding it like a prong, then the figure also comes included with hands for that as well. To change out the hands, by the way, I mean, this whole time of talking about hands, let's go ahead and just remove the hands. The hands were very easy to remove. Just wiggle them off, pop them off. Very small posts, and then we're just going to swap them out with the hands that we want to use. So let's use maybe the wider grip hand on one side. We'll remove there's blood all over this as well. Going to remove this hand too, and let's replace it with the smaller grip hand and show you guys the 2 different ways of displaying the sai. Speaking of sai, the figure does come included with a pair of those. I'm having a look at these right now. First of all, I do really like the way they've done the sai. Very, very slim, very slender looking sai, painted nicely here in silver. You got the wrappings there, of course, done here in a dark chestnut brown. Paint overall, for the most part, is pretty good. There's a few little areas that's missed its mark just a little bit, but overall, like, the size do look good. And again, you can display them in his hands. Storage space is always an important thing when it comes to turtles carrying around their own weapons. There is places, of course, on the turtle shell that you can, if you spin around to the back, he has actually these little 2 looplets here. You take the sai, and you put them in on one side, and instead of actually doing it on the opposite side, you're going to flip these around, and they'll meet in the middle. Crisscross applesauce. There you go. That looks nice. I really like the look of those. And of course, there's still lots of compartment spaces to store the various arrows that are going to be lodged onto the back of the turtle's half shell. So again, there's some storage space there. While that's stored right away, let's look at some of the other things the figure comes included with before we kind of talk about the more grimmer things. The figure, first of all, also comes included with one of those triangular pieces that normally would have held a rope. Rope would go into this, and then basically you would throw this, and I guess the turtle would be climbing up the rope that way. There's storage space for that as well. If you look on the side of the leg, there's a looplet right there. If you take the loop and you put it in first, it might be the easiest way to get that in there. And you basically just wiggle it back and forth. You don't have to wiggle, but you'll wiggle this back and forth, and it'll stay fairly well in place. Actually, I was kind of thinking that this would fall out just by the way it is. But if you look at it, that ring is just the right size that it prevents this from falling back out. So there's some storage space for that as well. I'm going to remove it for this right now, at least just because looking at the figure's articulation, I want to move the legs and stuff like that. I just don't really want to get that in the way of things. You know, also while we're at it too, let's remove the sigh. Sing, sing. I don't think that's really the sound effects that sigh make. The figure also comes included with a various amount of arrows, all of them covered and tipped in blood. First of all, he comes included with this one. And this is the one that actually gets lodged into his leg. If you're looking at the figure, as quickly as I put it back down, there's a hole right here, and you can also follow the stream of blood that's coming out of the hole. That hole also exits out the back here as well. So what you do is you take yourself the arrow. You can have it, I suppose, either way. I just like to have the point kind of facing forward. And then just put it in on one side, and then just twist it back and forth. The first time you're doing this, you're going to notice that it's probably going to have to take a few little twists before it eventually gets in. You don't want to make sure, of course, that you're not putting too much pressure on this. There we go. And it slides all the way through. Pretty grim, isn't it? And of course, I'm sure it didn't start like this in red, but obviously ended in red as it went right through the turtle's leg. While he's doing that, while he's coping with that, the figure also comes included with all these various arrows. If you count out the arrows, we've got 4 right now, another 4 will be down here, that gives us a total of 8. Hey, that's simple math. If you're looking at the arrows, they all seem to be identical to one another. The only thing that might vary from one to the other is just the amount of blood that's on the end of them. Some are clean. Actually, some are clean on one side, but then if you flip it around the other side. But it looks like, if looking at the placement of the blood, they're almost identical in spots. See, you're looking at this one that looks kind of a little bit like a red jelly bean. The red jelly bean carries over here, and it carries here as well. So again, he's got all these various arrows, and what are we going to do with those arrows, you might ask? Located on the back of the shell. You might already be able to see it. There's a slot right there. If I get my finger out of the way, there's a slot, there's a slot. Basically, you're just going to take these arrows and you lodge them into his body. Now, I will tell you, the back of the shell is fairly soft plastic. Initially thinking I would really have to fight to get the arrows on the back of his shell. I didn't have to fight at all, no. Basically, just lodge it in and just rinse and repeat until you've got all the remaining 8 arrows all finished. Just plug that in place, slot that one in as well. We'll take this one and put it right in smack dab in the middle. And then again, we're just going to continue to put all these arrows on the back of poor Raphael's body. Again, we'll put it on one side. We've got 2 arrows left to go. There's one right there. And there is always that one last arrow that I have a hard time to find until I realize it's right over here. There we go. So I suppose, to the credit of NECA Toys, they have given essentially accessories that can be all stored on the figure, whether he likes it or not. Just a gruesome way of displaying the character. Now, the only problem with this, obviously, if you're going to be putting this guy on the shelf along with the rest of your turtles, this guy's going to probably have to go a little bit further forward just because the arrows all on the back, you know, they're going to be a little bit more cramped in quarters. Let's go ahead and remove these. We'll remove, ouch, first the one that's in his leg. Maybe not as ouchy, but we're going to also remove the ones on the back of his shell as well. And again, fairly easy to remove. I would think, though, the more times you're doing this, you're probably going to start to stretch this slot here, that the arrows might not be as easy to fit in the next time, or the time after that, or the time after that. You get the idea. Let's go remove those right now. The last thing that comes included with Raphael, if that wasn't enough anguish for the poor character, he does also have this open expressioned mouth as well. The bandana is very similar. The blood placement is a little bit more, I would say, generous on this one, but he does have, of course, more of the screaming face on this one. Again, changing out the head sculpts. Just want to wiggle the head and remove it from the post. There we go. And we'll just pop then the new head in place. Put a little bit of pressure to the top. There we go. We want to make sure it's all the way on there. Now, I will tell you, though, I've only done this one time before. I didn't even have to heat it. I probably could have really heated it just prior to this review. But the head went on the first time fairly easy enough. I had to kind of, I suppose I did have to put a little bit of pressure on that. But that's basically what that alternate head sculpt looks like. Both do feature bandana trails on the back. Again, the colors on the eyes are fantastic. One thing notable about all the NECA Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the last Ronin figures that we've gotten so far, is the panel lining on all these characters is really handled well. Of course, the closed mouth still manages to pull off a top and bottom row of teeth. This one, again, does have now more expression, much more tongue as well, and that's painted nicely there in pink. I think of displaying these, I tend to usually jump to the alternate head sculpt when it comes to displaying these turtles. Although I did, I think, beeline it back to the original head sculpt. No, that wasn't the original head sculpt. This was the second one for Leonardo. And I think I also ended up doing the exact same thing with Michelangelo as well. Like with all the other turtles, the articulation is going to be the exact same on this guy. So its head's going to be on a ball joint. It's going to rotate back and forth. It moves up, it moves down, and you can also move it back and forth too. Initially thinking there was some articulation on the tail of his bandana, I was happy and relieved to see that there was. You can sway that back and forth. So if you want to have it up, you can have it up. If you want to have it down, well, you know what I mean. As for the arms do rotate all the way around. Now with this shoulder pad, let's actually in fact move these guys out of the way. I just don't want to pull the focus away from Raphael. Now this one shoulder is actually attached to the front of his armor, which again is a softer piece of appliance. When it comes to moving his arm, not necessarily as limited when it comes to bringing his arms outward, but rotating all the way around. I don't really like the idea of doing that just because I worry that this might rip. As you can see, there's lots of blood though all over his shoulders. A fair bit of blood also across his neck. There really isn't as much in the leg other than really the top of the thigh. And there's just obviously a little bit of stream that comes out the hole there below. For his legs split out. You can take the legs and move forward. You can move them back. Did we not even talk about the elbows? Let's go back to the elbows. The figure does have a swivel in his bicep. He has a double hinge on the elbow. And can't help but overlook the fact the figure does have a swivel in his hands that also hinge back and forth too. The top of the torso, although it's a little harder to see because it's basically sandwiched by both sides of soft plastic. But there seems to be, though, a ball joint on the inside that allows the top of the torso to move just only a little bit. Legs split out, as you can see, there's ball joints. The legs also allow the ball joints allow the legs to move forward, move back. A swivel at the top of the thigh, double hinge on the knee. No articulation, because I was kind of thinking there would be articulation here where the bandaged leg would start, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Ankle pivot back and forth, and ankle rocker. And just in case you're curious, poor Raphael suffers. There's peg holes on the undersides of his feet as well. Let's now bring back the other turtles. Now, advertised also on the back of the box, you may have already seen this for yourself, there's also an image there of Karai. So definitely looking forward to getting Karai and would love to have that displayed along with Raphael for his final moments. All in all, though, again, I really like this line quite a lot. You can also see as well something I kind of talked a little bit about before when we were looking at Michelangelo and Leonardo, that the colors of the turtles aren't all exactly the exact same. I would say, though, that Raphael matches a little more close to the colors to Leonardo, but the colors are still a little bit different, one other way of separating and differentiating the characters from one another. Again, when it comes to storage of the weapons, all the weapons can be displayed on the turtles. Leonardo, of course, not dropping the turtle, not dropping any of the turtles for that matter. Leonardo's, of course, did have the katanas. Wakizashi sword could also be displayed on the back of his body. And in a similar fashion, Raphael can have his displayed as well. Michelangelo, so far, is the only one that has the weapon being actually carried around on the front of his body. But again, I do really like that all of the costumes are very much, again, not only looking like they were in the comics, but they are very much different from one another. So it's not just a case that they carbon copied each and every figure release. As we now wrap up the review for the new NECA Toys Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Last Ronin Raphael, the figure and character unfortunately has seen better days. With all the arrows lodged on the back of his body, not to mention one red one sticking through his leg, I'd be hard-pressed to see that Raphael's just fine. If somebody was to ask him, "How you doing today, Raph?" "No, I'm just feeling fine." There's no way you're feeling fine. Look how many you got 8 arrows lodged on the back in your shell, and then you got one stuck right through your leg. There's no way. You could tell us you're fine, but there's no way we're ever going to believe you. What I do believe, though, is that NECA did go all out with this release, not only including all the arrows, not only including also the sai, but as well 2 alternate head sculpts, similar, of course, practice to what they've already been doing so well with the last Ronin figures. Now, of course, all we need is a Karai. Karai is advertised, though, on the back of the box, so definitely looking forward to getting my hands on that one at some point. And if I do get the chance, definitely I will be displaying Raphael in his final days, his final moments, battling Karai. Big thank you once again to the folks over at NECA that provided this sample we could have a look at of the last Ronin Raphael. What do you guys think of this figure? Have you had the chance already to pick it up, or is this a figure that's certainly on your list? If you guys also, in the meantime, did enjoy this video, want to throw it a like. If you guys want to stick around for more, well then, hit the subscribe, turn on the bell, come back please. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.